Radio OKiTALK, Radio OKiTALK, von Mensch zu Mensch.
I am most happy to welcome once again Bryan Lahr for the Wizard of Odd Edition 7. Welcome, Bryan.
Hard to believe we've already done 7 of these, huh? It's great to be back. I'm really looking forward to today. It's a good time in the world.
Yes, I agree. So this is, in a sense, the Chariot edition. The theme for today actually is Bibliomancy and Manly Palmer Hall's The Secret Teachings of All Ages. However, due to current events, we also wish to provide some perspective on what's going on right now and maybe some reading, which anyhow we had also announced we wanted to do. So we're just going to combine these ideas. And yeah, I'll just ask you, Bryan, to take us away in that sense.
Glad to. I have a really good friend who works at the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, and I've been keeping an eye on this coronavirus thing that's happening, and I'm never one to get excited about the histrionics that go on around stuff at all, and I'm pretty skeptical at first, and but she was like, she is as well, which is the thing that sort of got my attention, and she said, don't get panicked or anything like that, but just keep an eye on this and just be aware of what's happening. So in that mindset, I want to pass along some information that I've gotten. When I first heard about it, I was like, here we go. It's another end of the world pandemic thing. They're always saying that about the flu, and there are some pretty gnarly flus out there. Like it killed 10,000 people in the United States last year. But this particular thing has the potential to really get out of control, and one of the things to do are physical things that we'll talk about in a second, and to be prepared. But it's also if you know the fire's coming or the hurricane's coming, like we were just talking about a few minutes ago. You get on your bicycle and do some energy work to make sure that goes in the other direction. So way more than scaring anybody today, I just would like to kind of maybe focus some positive energy on seeing what we can do to make that not happen. So first of all, as I found out about it, all the rumors about it at first, where it came from, blah, 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 some weird food market. But no, it really, the truth of the matter is it was a biological developed in a facility that's very close to Wuhan, and it either got out by accident. Nobody's sure how it actually happened, but that's where that originated. And as a matter of fact, the people in Wuhan, there was a big mob of people that stormed that facility and set a bunch of things on fire. Like, I'm not exactly sure how that was going to help releasing whatever else was there, but it's kind of crazy. I've been keeping track of the numbers of things that are happening. I've got a really good website. I'll shoot you an email later on. You might want to just kind of check it out too. This guy's really great about having factual graphs and really having some information that's devoid of hyperbola and craziness. I think one of the things that really got my attention about this was, when they rate diseases and how dangerous they are, they go from an RO 0 to an RO4, and what that means is, say like the regular flu is an RO1, and what that means is that for every one person infected, they infect one other person. And then they track it out like through 10 cycles of the disease, going around and around and through its little life. And, as those people spread it to other people, you see how it exponentially sort of grows. And even with the flu being at like a very low number, the lowest number, which is R01, there were still like several 100,000 people infected, and 10,000 people died. So it was worth checking out. Then the thing that really got me about this coronavirus is it's an R04, which means, and that's the highest worst rating. And what that really means is that for every single person infected, they infect 4 other people. And then as that cycles through, by the time that they ran it through 10 cycles and the multiplication of it over 10 cycles, by the time the coronavirus got to 10 cycles, it was in the trillions of people, which are more people that are on the face of the earth. Now that's a like left unchecked, and if this, if it happens at its worst mode, that's the possibility. But it was really quite eye-opening to see how fast that would change. And the other thing that's really critical about this particular virus, the flu, you're not really contagious with the flu until you start showing symptoms, and then it's time to go stay inside, get away from your friends, quarantine yourself up, and get yourself healthy again. Well, this particular virus is super easily transmittable through the air, through people's touch, through all kinds of close contact, and you can have this contagious. You can be contagious 7 to 14 days before you even begin to show any symptoms at all, which to me is the kind of most sobering part of that, because it has the potential for people being sick. And like, say somebody was sick and they went to the Super Bowl this weekend, and the crowd of people there, I mean, that would be a pretty devastating outcome to that. So anyway, I think that people in China, I think right now they're reporting like 500 or 600 people dead, and like I think it's like 25,000 people infected, and that is multiplying. I've been kind of paying attention to it for the last week, and it is kind of following the graph of that prediction. As a matter of fact, the World Health Organization, I got access to a graph that they put out about it, and the mortality rate, and their graph shows by the end of February, like 400,000 people, a mortality rate. The greatest portion of those certainly are in China, where it's gotten out of control, which it's sort of past the point there where it would have been easy to squash, and they're doing everything they can to contain it and keep it in areas. But like before the virus even was, any knowledge about that was going to the outside, there were like, several million people that have flown from China to points all over the world. And in fact, there's a bunch of countries that have people that are infected. I think in the States, it's like 14 or 15 right now, known cases. And I think there's like 1 or 2 deaths so far. It's a pretty gnarly disease. It's like a super pneumonia kind of thing. And it has some staying power. So anyway, the things to be able to do to be prepared for that here, we're also at the beginning of a solar minimum, which has characteristically, if you go back and track solar minimums all the way back to like the 1400s, you kind of see like the waves of famines and food shortages also coupled with large plagues like the Black Plague, and there have been historically some really intense viral things that have gone on, and those, shockingly to me, every single one of them coincided with a solar minimum. And that's approaching, or we're beginning that right now. We're just at the beginning stages of that. That's like an 11-year cycle. So it's really good to, I live in Miami, so we have lots and lots of hurricanes, as you well know. So pretty much if you live here, to have some water stockpiled, some batteries, just kind of like instant survival supplies in the worst case scenario, and if you don't need them, awesome, you're prepared for the next possibility. But, I've taken it to heart, and, have had food supplies and water and stuff. Like the last hurricane that I went through, going on like 2.5, 3 years ago, my power was out here for like 10 days. So it was really kind of a good thing that I had enough supplies and things put away to get me through that scenario without, really being in a difficult situation. So for the coronavirus thing, that's pretty much what's being recommended too. Just be aware, keep your eyes open, pour all the energy you have into, making that dissipate and not bloom to full fruition. And with enough people doing that, I think that's a great possibility for just crushing what could be a very difficult situation. You got any? I know you have something to say about it, so please let me hear.
So of course there are many interesting perspectives. I think it's just in general, as with any information, always kind of difficult to handle if it is clear that there is ultimately only very few information sources that are actually providing the statistics or anything like that. There are, of course, let's just say, varying perspectives on organizations such as the World Health Organization, and also especially the so-called Center for Disease Control. And as we understand, of course, as well, is that even for a state in terms of security, or for a health system in terms of quote unquote, assisting those that are sick, you also kind of need a problem in order to even have demand for your service in a sense. And as far as I understand, especially the CDC kind of also had been implied in these ideas before. And aside from that, I just generally don't necessarily put a lot of trust in so-called authoritative organizations. And I'm especially wary if something gets broadcast and hyped up so strongly. However, then, of course, I'm also all with you. Definitely, there is sense in not living in this absolute, let's say, only just-in-time way, although that is the way of synchronicity, so that's also certainly possible. It can, of course, if it helps someone in their own belief systems to have, some food or something at home, which anyhow is just nice because it means you don't need to go out any day if you want to eat something. So there's other benefits to this as well. And as you mentioned, if you get some good food that is well preserved, or what I like is you get some spirulina, which is super healthy. You don't need so much, and you could live off it probably for weeks if you wanted to, if you have a kilogram of spirulina tablets or two. So there's certainly a point to that. However, what I would also like to say, or as far as I understand, even with this quote unquote virus, and there's also a whole study in terms of what is a virus exactly and how well can each virus be proven. This one very interesting quote I heard once, and maybe there's something you want to mention about that, also because you brought it into relationship with the solar minimum, which again asks the question, is this a correspondence? Is this a correlation? What is it? The one thing I heard once was something along the lines of, there was a time when people were afraid of invisible forces and demons, possessing them or something, which we would now call quote unquote medieval times, whatever this means. However, then if we look at the present, where supposedly in terms of scientism and let's say the modern type of allopathic health, however, still we are afraid of unseen forces that can possess us. So if you catch my drift, it's kind of like almost a similar story, and we're laughing about what may have happened back then, but today there's very similar fears. And I'm not even now saying it's true or not or something, but I just find these correlations to be very interesting.
First of all, there are unseen forces that can fuck with you for sure. We are not the top of the food chain, my good brother, by any stretch of the imagination. You know, one of the other correlations to this too that I can't help but find interesting is, you know, one of our topics on the last show was talking about the Saturn-Pluto conjunction in Capricorn, and you know, that's still going on. Those two planets move so slowly. That'll be around for a number of months. But, you know, the Saturn-Pluto conjunction is very intense because it's about breaking down rigid structures and constructs that don't work anymore and need to be replaced in some way, shape, or form. And it's kind of similar that that conjunction also sort of coincides with world events. And, you know, the thing about Saturn and Pluto, they certainly have effect in your personal life, but those two planets together, they're really affecting things on a global. It's more of a whole Earth kind of perspective of what's happening. So the energy fields are really changing at a very rapid rate. And it's just kind of interesting to be aware of all of the things that are happening right now and seeing them actually connected to things that, like, I've been researching for decades, and kind of a crazy thing. And one thing I want to make sure, I'll probably say this again and again and again. This is about being aware, not afraid. This is not this is not a predetermined outcome that this is going to happen. This is about being aware of what the weather conditions are and being able to dress accordingly. And, you know, I am always a firm believer that, you know, energy and the power of concentrated intent is bigger than any physical thing here. So
yeah, and I've even heard of people capable of influencing the weather. So
yeah, that's very true. That's very, very true. So I thought it could be a cool thing to do a little tarot card reading. Maybe we'll pull an angel card too, on just the best way to attenuate and alleviate any the upcoming corona scenario. Are you good with that?
I'm all for it, and I'm also all up for participating and also drawing one or two cards.
Awesome. All right, let me get shuffled up here. So it's my birthday this weekend now. I'm an old guy now.
Yeah, congratulations, I heard.
Thanks.
Not that you're old or older than before, but it's your birthday.
You know, it just, the actual physical age that I am just so doesn't compute with my, I'm 35, man. I'm going to stay 35 until I die. You know, that's my story. I'm sticking to it. And it's just kind of, it's such a weird disconnect to think of, like, I'm in my 60s now. Anyway, let me get focused here. Hold on. All right. So I just got really clearly as I was shuffling to do a two-part question. The first one I'll do, we'll just ask what we need to know about it. All right. So I'm doing a four elemental, a four element reading.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I basically decided to draw two cards, and I'll just use one for each part of the question, how you're framing it.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Okay, so the first column of three cards is the fire column, and that represents the energy that's surrounding the situation. And the first card is the Seven of Swords. You know, I kind of frame these a little bit in a past, present, future. So but like really immediate past within, you know, the few weeks, and then the last card is kind of like the really immediate future in the next week or two. So the first card is the Seven of Swords. The next card is the Two of Cups, and then the last card is the Moon. You know, the Seven of Swords is about deceit and you know, that really kind of goes to what's happening right now. We're getting so much misinformation in so many different directions, and I think that's kind of what's building to that. The second card is the Two of Cups, which is an awesome card, but it's in the fire column, so it's ill dignified and diluted a little bit. So you know, that card is about people coming together. You know, it's not just about love, but it's also about people coming together towards an idea. And I think, you know, that's kind of exactly what we're doing right now. And then the last card is the Moon, which is, you know, a little bit weird in the fire column as well. But it's, you know, when the other cards around it are not so good, it tends to be on the paranoia, you know, kind of like fear zone. And I think that's kind of the energy that's happening right now. There's a lot, you know, it's good to be aware, not afraid. You know, fear never helps any situation. It only fires whatever is negative in that. Whereas, you know, if you're aware and you're staying in a positive zone with like, this is what I want to have happen, you know, a lot of that fear and those things that creep around in the back of your skull and your subconscious that make you want to go to that space go away. Okay, the second column is the water column. So that really deals with the emotional state and energies that are happening around the situation. And, you know, the first card is the Three of Swords, you know, like ultimate heartbreak. And I think there are a lot of people that are feeling that way about that. Certainly in China, there are. But that's also an air card, which is about like, you know, those are thoughts. Those aren't necessarily realities. Those are what you're thinking about the situation, not actually what the situation is. So I think that that's really appropriate that, you know, you know, what's coming up, people have been feeling really heartbroken about. And, you know, not to just discount, there are so many people in China are actually really hurting in a bad way. So I think that's about that. And then the second card is the Five of Pentacles. You know, that's one of my least favorite cards. Not that like the cards are better or worse, but that card just so much goes with it that's just not good. It's the other people looking outside and in destitution, you know, as other people are eating and enjoying life. And it's like, it's financial because it's a pentacle, it's really relates to material things. And if you look at it from the perspective of what's going on in China, they went and quarantined a ton of cities, the whole of Wuhan province, but they didn't ship in any food. They didn't ship in any supplies. They just closed the roads and put up military people to stop people from getting out. So all those people are in there starving. It's like, wow.
And it seems no matter what the actual quote unquote health situation in terms of the disease is, even that in itself certainly is a type of catastrophe and failure.
It is indeed. And in a huge...
So it's the Five of Pentacles, right?
That's correct. The good, then the last card is the Sun, which is an awesome card. It's like that card has so much energy behind it, it's hard to dilute it. But since it is in the water column and it follows two really kind of wobbly cards, it's probably not as full of success, complete success as possible. So, the thing to feel about this, though, is your own personal power towards being able to do something about it, and the power of uniting to all of us on a whole to focus some energy towards a really positive and excellent outcome to that. Okay, so not the last row, but the next row is the air column, and that's the mental things being thought about this, the plans that are happening. And this is great. You're gonna love this. The first card is the Hermit, and that's followed by the Magus of the body, and followed up by the Six of Wands. So what an awesome thing, So you're going inside personally to gather your inner light, to figure out, what's going on with it. Then you're proceeding out to project the body. The Magus of the body in my deck is always about the material skills that you have here and the ability to use your energy to project and manifest things for you in the real world. So, the plans are being made and the energy is now being put forth to change that situation. And then the last card in there is the Six of Wands. So, it's success. It's like that those plans worked, that those things happened and were great. And, they work out really well.
The Lord of Victory, right?
Yes, exactly. Well, the Six of Wands. Yes.
Exactly. It's the Lord of Victory, I believe, no?
Mm-hmm. You're correct. So the way this reading works, it's like you have the energy about it, you have the feelings and emotional energy about it, you have the mental planning about it, and if all of those things are left to flow as they're laid out right now, the Earth column that we're about to get to is the probable the probable materialization of that in the physical world. So it's the Earth column. And the first card is the Six of Pentacles. Woohoo! The second card is the Emperor. Woohoo! And the last card is the Ace of Pentacles. Awesome. So what that says to me is, despite all the fear and the craziness that started all of this, and the weird feelings about it and people getting afraid, the planning and the energy being put forth towards that already, combined with people as they gather into that tribe and push that intent for it to go away out there, then that manifests in just a really amazing way. And the Six of Pentacles is success. It's the Emperor who, the one who goes to war and has victory, and has control of enough things to actually affect the bigger picture, the global picture, not just the personal picture. And then the Ace of Pentacles, which, the aces are the the essence of these elements. So that's the essence of earth and manifestation, and that card is about the beginning of manifesting goodness. So I think that's a really, really happy reading, and I honestly that also kind of like dually answers both questions I was going to ask, because it's just laid out so perfectly. Don't be afraid. Don't and look for information yourself. There is good information out there. You just have to dig a little bit. And the truth is, even if you're looking at multiple sources that have kind of conflicting, it's just like in a crowd of people that, there's your truth and my truth, and the real truth is somewhere in the middle there, and I think that's kind of the reality of this too. I think there's people that are giving it less attention than it needs. There's a whole bunch of people giving it way more crazy attention than it needs. And, somewhere in the middle there is the reality that, yes, it is a disease scenario that's out of the norm. But there's also things that are being done, and people jumped on it. I have to give the government, our government, props, man. They kind of like jumped on top of it, and a bunch of people said that it was like, unnecessary. But, as I've seen innumerable times with the hurricanes that blow through here, it seems like if you over-prepare at the beginning without causing panic, then a lot of times just that energy makes things not materialize and manifest. So I have to say, I think they're handling it very well. I think there's a number of governments around the world that seem to be handling it very well. And, the World Health Organization is on top of it. And, the CDC, there are amazing, amazing, amazing people that work there and help us stay healthy and avoid calamities. That,
Well, I'm glad you have such a positive view also of this particular organization. As I said, I've heard different stories, but as always, as we can assume in all organizations, there's all kinds of different people and different agendas going on. What this just reminds me of, in a sense, what I had heard about, I believe, last year, that your President Trump actually called out something of a National Preparedness Month, which I found was pretty interesting. And of course, again, as with anything, if it is not done in a fear-mongering type way, and especially because there may be, so many levels and layers of control and dynamics going on. And of course, there is always the issue, of a very, let's say, powerful organization or whatever, basically, let's say, is telling everyone be prepared for war, because basically they are the ones, let's say, ultimately orchestrating a war or financing both sides or anything like that. However, what can also be considered is that if for any reason there may be one party, such as certain governments, that are, maybe not directly implicated or whatever, wanted this to happen, quote unquote, then it's still interesting how it is dealt with and what language is being used, and whether then ultimately you're doing it in the sense of, oh, be afraid, now buy more of this or of that to make us more profits, or if it's more like, look, it is smart because of various reasons, which maybe actually that entity cannot prevent, to be prepared in a positive sense, because then ideally that preparedness, just as you may have alluded to, can actually be a permission slip to alleviate any excessive fears.
Absolutely.
And that, of course, takes the energy out of it. So even here, there's many different layers of dynamics going on. And it's always good to take a very, very close and well-balanced look at all these different energy strings and potentialities going on concurrently.
That National Preparedness Day, I'm so behind. And actually the birthplace of that was, if you look at the number of disasters that have happened in this country over the last, 4 or 5 years, from the wildfires in California to, massive flooding in a number of states, and a lot of people, in Florida, were prepared as much as you can be for hurricanes. And like there are areas, and there's an area with Oklahoma and part of Texas, kind of goes up through the Midwest there, called Tornado Alley, where the pattern of thunderstorms happens pretty much every year, and that it knocks dust from those people in hurricanes. But they all have tornado shelters, and they have food. We have stockpiled our water and our batteries and all that stuff, because we've experienced that before. But there've been like the wildfires out in California that just went crazy, especially with the like the super high winds, the Santa Ana winds and stuff. The last couple waves of that just really caught people off guard. And that's again, with a bunch of the severe rain and flooding and stuff, a bunch of people were not in a good place at all. As a matter of fact, Houston, Texas, like for a while, was Lake Houston. It was craziest thing I've ever seen. So that's where the birth of that national preparedness thing came in, and really isn't about trying to scare you, but just having to be ready for any alternative, which is always a good thing for me.
What I think, of course, especially with these, apparently uncontrollable phenomena in terms of health, again, where the information is mostly being displayed through a very few specific sources and then distributed, or also with these so-called weather phenomenon, as I understand, with proper research and even government documentation, one can be aware that also, let's say, quote-unquote geoengineering, quote-unquote weather type weapons, and who knows what else, also do exist. And also, of course, that on a very simple level, there are, of course, various reasons as to why certain fires can even happen. Then, of course, it greatly depends on the response by the firefighters and so on. However, just on a very simple level, what, quote-unquote, I recently learned or got reminded of is that, for example, if you have a mountain that's with a forest, and you cut down all the trees because you're greedy for the wood, or where you want to build something, and then maybe the weather is changing, and you can easily get mudslides. And similar things seem to have happened. It doesn't matter, actually, both in relation to health, because if everyone had a super strong immune system,
there were so many elements in that whole fire scenario. Certainly the one you're talking about was correct. But one of the reasons some of those fires, especially towards the northern part of California, spread so rapidly is because there was no logging, no like clearing out of any of that stuff for a very, very long time. There was tons and tons of dry woods and stuff that was perfect tinder, and just woof. I've never seen anything like it. It just exploded, so there were screw ups pretty much in every direction of how that was handled,
Yeah, and then of course the question is whether it's all, just screw-ups, or whether there's on some level some kind of intentionality. Just for example, with Australia, as far as I understand, there have been certain redirections of rivers and so on and so forth. So what I'm saying is basically, no matter whether it's about the disease or a so-called natural phenomenon, whether it's actually natural or not, let's leave that aside in terms of cause. But it always seems that in order even for these things to have actual destructive effects, you already need to have an environment set up that is really favorable, quote unquote, for destruction. Either meaning a weakened immune system and a bad lifestyle and, no connection to yourself, and or, having removed all the rivers and all of these kind of things. So what I'm kind of saying is that while it's always, again, also good to be prepared and to be self-responsible and to be very aware and not outrageous, as you mentioned, it's equally important to see the environmental factors in terms of what has happened before, what has allowed this certain environment to occur, which is, of course, ultimately also we ourselves, whether it's our own body and internal immune system, or whether it's what we are, let's say, allowing to happen in this world, or how we are contributing. And to always put that into context, and then just be aware that even if there were fires, if maybe some things before would have been handled differently, maybe, with less greed and so on and so forth, and more foresight, more circumspection, more self-awareness, then this, let's say, quote unquote, potentially dangerous thing happening now wouldn't even have, quote unquote, any ground to germinate, if you can follow what I'm saying.
Sure. Yeah. I just turned 62. So I've had 6 decades to watch shit happen. And I applied this mindset to the coronavirus thing we were just talking about. I can't tell you the number of times that I got on board with looking for, the Illuminati fucking things up. I mean, certainly there are people that are power hungry in the world that want to do things. George Soros, he's trying to behind the scenes control the entire world, but those people don't get to do that, they really don't. And I can't tell you the number of scenarios that I've seen with, intense anticipation of that event coming by, and man, it rolls over and goes by, and all of a sudden it may have had some effect, but the tsunami was 1.5 feet instead of 100 feet. So I just like to throw that out there too. Just always keep the world is a pretty amazing organism, and I think we can maybe scuff it up a little bit, but I think it pretty much functions in spite of us. I think we're just sort of parasites on it. We're a bunch of bugs running around on it. Well, it's so bigger than us. It's like, yeah.
There is always certainly greater forces at work. I certainly wouldn't see the human race as parasitic. Although I would rather identify, that type of behavior within our own psychology and, reform ourselves in that light. What I would like to do now, if you agree, is that, because I also pulled 2 cards, as I had mentioned. One is an alien card where I'd briefly read part of the description. I'm not exactly sure how it relates, but maybe you'll have an idea. And then I would also mention the tarot card of a Kabbalistic tarot, which I drew also for the reading you just did, if you agree.
Awesome. That's great.
All right. So the alien card I got was from, again, Lister Royal's Galactic Heritage cards. This is card number 49. It is an Earth card, which probably fits quite well in this scenario.
That's great.
It is related with the past, because this is always for different timelines, in this case, past, present, future. So it says 49, Earth, past, missing link. And it says, the human race has never truly been alone. Since ancient times, our ET forefathers have been working with us, both genetically and spiritually, to nurture our development as a species. Uplifting a younger species is a natural part of galactic civilization. You pulled this card because you have a past life connection to these ancient projects between humans and ETs. As you explore this connection, you will find that the so-called missing link is not just a genetic reference, but a spiritual one. What has been missing is an understanding of who we are and our place in a vast galactic community. So this is the alien card, and the tarot card that I got is actually the Seven of Pentacles, which here says failure. What are your thoughts on these 2 ideas?
Well, I'm infinitely familiar with the Seven of Pentacles, and that's a difficult card, and certainly, one of the main ways I learned that is failure. But what that card really talks to is success after many attempts and failing, and what that card speaks to is keeping faith, keeping hope in what you're doing and your path forward. And as difficult as it can be in the middle of a scenario where it looks like you've failed, and no matter how much you want to just say, okay, fuck it, this isn't going to work, to stay on that card and to stay on that path and to keep the positive intent on what you're doing, it represents success in that scenario. You know, it is a card of making many attempts and getting it wrong. But hopefully from that, instead of just giving up at the first or second attempt, you keep refining the process of what you're doing and, you know, evolving that and growing that and discarding the things that don't work and the things that kept that from going to full fruition. And it's kind of a hard taskmaster, but it is a great teacher. And so what are your thoughts about that card?
Yeah, I mean, as I understand it, it's also about, let's say, the reorganization of the physical world. And just to also relate, because I may have more background on it, the missing link card, also just in a numerological sense, it's the 49. Of course, these
777, yeah.
these alien cards have 108 cards, so this is card 49. However, 49, of course, also reduces to 13. And 13 would be, in this deck, as I understand, something along the lines of birth and expansion. A Lyra card, is, if I remember correctly. And the other interesting part is that the very last card of your elemental reading for Earth Future column was One of Pentacles, which is a 67, which is also the 13 and 4, of course. So we both at least have one reference in terms of background vibration, let's say death, immortality, and emperor, which in that theme in itself already is pretty interesting. How the whole idea of genetics and spiritual or galactic connections fit in, I guess we're going to eventually figure out. However, what's also certain is that aside from any biological happenings, we are also right now most obviously in the process of mutating our own consciousness and of also reorganizing the physical. That's like how I see the Seven of Pentacles, because anyways, and also with the fire future in terms of moon, potential illusions. So I would say that most certainly it can be a catalyst for positive change.
And the Seven of Swords started that reading.
All right.
You know, instead it was replete with sevens. So that 7, your 2 sevens, the 49 is a square of 7, and then it ends up on that Ace of Pentacles. Kind of crazy.
And what's certainly also interesting is in terms of astrological connections, the conjunction with Saturn, Pluto, if I say this correctly, and reorganization or even revolution of structure. What's certainly obvious, and we didn't need any type of apparent virus outbreak for that, is that it is certainly a good idea to closely look at our so-called health system. I mean, in Germany or Austria, in German, it is called Krankenhaus, so literally sick house. And whether we really want to be focusing on that, where usually, as far as I understand, at least in Vienna, they're just constructing them with a very huge budget, and then nothing gets delivered, just like with some airport in Berlin or whatever. And whether we wouldn't rather, again, take up more self-responsibility for our own health, do more wellness, not do things that we really don't like to do, and love ourselves and each other more. And that would also certainly be a revolutionary type of reorganization, where again, even anything that apparently on the outside is negative may provide positive catalyst. And just to bring it back to the fire, in this case in Australia, that's what I heard, at least again, is that this apparently revealed some crazy type, structures and underground tunnel entrances and who knows what. So even here, I believe they say there may be a silver lining.
Absolutely, yes. And you said something there that, like, to me is the gem out of everything that's been said. Love ourselves and love each other. I mean, in a real sense, not in a like talking, but in a really real sense. Love yourself enough to take care of the miracle that you are. Eat right, do the things that develop all parts of you and evolve yourself and exude that energy and spread that to the people that are around you. And, it's gotten to be kind of a time where there doesn't seem to be a lot of love for each other. It seems to be a lot of love for whatever I want, and I want you to do it that way. And it's like, wow, guys, just chill out already, man. You know, it's like, have some forgiveness, have some like, okay, let's figure this out mode, instead of, you know, the war clubs constantly beating everybody with trying to control the way they think and speak and talk. And it's just gotten crazy. So yeah, dude, that you just, I got a blast right up my spine when you said that. Love ourselves and love each other, man. That really, in, you know, the Occam's razor, the simplest solution. That's definitely the simplest and best solution to all of it, all of it, all of it. Like the whole global, like, you know, people are crazy. There's always going to be fucked up things happening in the world, but you know, we can evolve that with a concentrated, positive love, I believe. Oh, I was waiting for the drop.
Yeah, well, this is liquid drum and bass. We are here once again, the Wizard of Odd, episode 7, Bryan.
Dude, I gotta tell you, man, you have this uncanny ability to select musical tracks that like just get all over me for whatever vibe I'm in today, man. I was standing there, I was jamming all over the house. I was, yeah, wow. That was just really great. I enjoy
Awesome.
it so much, yeah.
So what would you say if we're now going to go into the Bibliomancy?
You got go into the Manly P Hall thing?
Yes.
Yeah, that'd be great. So how about if I've got my big book. I love my big book, by the way. It's one of the early editions of it. It's huge. It's like 22 inches tall, and oh man, the color plates in it are just so yummy beyond words. And you know, I'm such a bibliophile. I love what's in books, but I also love the construction of the book itself. And I've made my own for a very long time. And this is just an exquisite example of bookbinding. So anyway, one of my favorite books, and you know, I think I brought this up, like if we were only going to take a couple books to a desert island, which ones would it be? And this one was on it. So I'm just going to, at random, pull a page and see what we get, and we'll talk about it if we can. Okay.
Awesome.
All right. The sun, a universal deity. Oh man. Well, you know, the sun is has been worshipped as a god since, I think, you know, the earliest versions of humans may, you know, look to the sun and the life-giving energy that comes from it, the warmth and the way that provides food for plants. I mean, if you think about all the plants all over the world that are just sucking up that juice and turning it into oxygen and air for us to breathe, and cleansing the planet and feeding themselves, it's a really, really beautiful thing. And it's kind of really cool throughout history to see the different ways that spiritual systems have attached holiness to the sun, and look to that as almost the supreme deity that brings life and death, actually. You know, if you're in the Sahara in the middle of summer and you don't have any water, it's probably not going to be considered such a good friend. but when you've been freezing and you walk out into the sun. Well, dude, the other day on my birthday, we got a cold snap, which, I mean, this doesn't sound very cold for most people, considering Iowa was sub-zero the other day. But my place was got down in the 40s, and it was super, super chilly to me, man. I'm like a sun-spoiled Miami boy now. So I'm looking at it. It's early in the morning, and I have this. This large oak tree in my garden, and as the sun comes up in the morning, it like forms these bright pools of light that are right next to are really kind of dark areas of shadow. So I'm standing in the shadowed area, just kind of freezing. Actually, I'm standing there shivering a little bit. Just took a couple steps out and raised my face right up into the direct sun, and it just, oh man, it was like instant warm you, and just I stood there and not just physically absorbed it, but just drank in the purity of that energy and intensity. You know, the sun has always been representative too of success and the energy to complete any deal. Actually not just success, but like overwhelming success. Like whatever, you know, if you're asking about something and you pull the sun card, it's like, yeah, that's gonna happen, man. And man, I've seen that play out thousands and thousands and thousands of times. Yeah, and I'm just kind of breezing through the birthday of the sun. The pagans set aside December 25th as the birthday of our solar man. They rejoiced, feasted. I'm sorry, here, hold on. Magnifying glass. My mind is 35, but my eyes are 62. They rejoiced, feasted, gathered in processions, and made offerings to the temple. The darkness of winter was over, and the glorious sun of light was returning to the northern hemisphere. With its last effort, the old sun god had torn down the house of the Philistines, the spirits of darkness, and had cleared a way for the new sun who was born that day from the depths of the earth amidst the symbolic beasts of the lower world. Amazing. Solar colors. The theory so long held of 3 primary and 4 secondary colors is purely esoteric. For since the earliest periods, it had been known that there are 7 and not 3 primary colors, the human eye being capable of estimating only 3 of them. Thus, although green can be made by combining blue and yellow, there is also a true or primary green, which was not a compound. Yes, it's glorious vibration. This can be proved by breaking up the spectrum with a prism. Helmholtz found that the so-called secondary colors of the spectrum could not be broken up into their supposed primary colors. Thus, the orange of the spectrum, if passed through a second prism, does not break up into red and yellow, but remains orange. Yeah, awesome. So, I know you got something to say about the sun.
Well, of course, what comes to mind, first of all, is the idea that according to Ra, law of one, the sun would be the local, let's say, super logos, or kind of the strongest local organizing principle or intelligence, which even biologically speaking, of course, is kind of obvious, as you mentioned. And there are many different variations on solar worship. You also just had mentioned the idea of the solar minimum happening right now. So also here we have an obvious correlation. What I also really like is just basically show how this is related. So it says here in the very first paragraph, in terms of the sun, it says, his beneficent influences caused his identification with the principle of good, and the Brahma of the Hindus, and Mithras of the Persians, and Atom, Amun, Ptah, and Osiris of the Egyptians, the Bel of the Chaldeans, the Adonai of the Phoenicians, the Adonis and Apollo of the Greeks, became but personifications of the sun, the regenerating principle, image of that fecundicity which perpetuates and rejuvenates the world's existence.
Yeah, awesome. We're on a good roll today, man. Yeah, the solar minimum. You know, the sun has such an effect on our our physical world, you know, when it's blasting us, when it's at peak activity. You know, we're getting bombarded with cosmic rays, and you know the intensity of that solar wind really compresses our magnetosphere in a really tight band around our Earth, and it kind of keeps a lot of stuff from getting to us from from outside. There's so many particles out there floating around, but when it goes into a solar minimum, that pressure around our magnetosphere lessens, and things, our magnetic sphere expands and is less dense. And I don't know that I put this forward as a truth for me, but this is definitely on the list of possibilities that I'm examining. That solar minimum, when it decreases the pressure around our magnetosphere and it expands, other particles and different things come through, and I've heard put forth the premise that that's when new mutated organisms and different things around the world, that's when they have kind of an opportunity to penetrate that. I saw a really great little video of the effects of the sun on our magnetosphere, and a lot of times you see it like drawn where everything's all like symmetrical, but it's anything but that, and it's really super random, and things depending on where we are in the orbit and what part of the sun is doing what, it expands like in different directions, just like your aura, your physical aura does. It's never just a perfect shape right around you. It's always like expanding out of areas like right now my solar plexus is like, boo, it's so much bigger right in front of me too. That area, it's like, it's huge. And I would imagine that my crown chakra is enlarged as well, and that it's such a scenario of, it's the ocean and waves. What kind of waves? What's the weather today, and what kind of waves are happening towards us right now? The fact that so many cultures have seen that as a source of light and life, and that they have that conception of it without really knowing why all of that was happening is pretty interesting to me.
Yeah, of course, there's then different stories about, different levels of civilizations and potentially different levels of sophistication of understanding it. However, even if we would speak of a potentially very or more simple type of intelligence, I would assume that any entity able to reason at all and living on this planet and is somewhat carbon-based or somehow related to how we are structured would quite quickly identify the sun as, of prime relevance.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, unless you're a vampire, but it's of prime relevance to them too.
Yeah, exactly.
You want to pull another one?
Sure, I would say we just go on and see what else comes up.
All right, here we go. Give us something good. Give us something good. All right. Wow. Okay, the human body in symbolism. And the illustration they use for this are 4 sets of seraphim wings surrounding a hand, a right hand extended up so that you see the palm, and the elements are attached to that. The planets are all attached to that. You have in your hand a map of your life lessons, and like your heart line, your lifeline, all of those things, and then the pads, like the pads of the phalanges of your finger, they all relate to elements. the mounds on the palm of your hand all relate to specific planets. So, and if you take other systems like numerology, if you take runes, if you take geomantic symbols, those all have relationships to your hand too. So, in a very compact microcosmic sense, you have an entire magical world right there in your hand. And by like taking your thumb and pressing the thumbnail of your thumb into one of the flanges of the finger, you activate whatever astrological sign that is, or whatever elemental scenario that is. Your fingers, your thumb is your spirit. Your first finger is water, air, or earth, fire, and air. So on those fingers, then the three astrological signs that relate to those elements. So if you're wanting to activate your fire, if you're wanting to activate or manifest something, and you go to the earth finger and activate Capricorn, you find access to those energies really, really quickly. And you can wind up doing stuff even in a crowd where you need to do something that you would normally do privately, where you have room to spread out. You can pull off little things on the fly right there with that, and kind of a very, 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 very cool thing.
Yeah, this is of course obviously related to mudras as well, right? So it's interesting always how different religious or spiritual systems and of course come back to very similar ideas. Obviously.
It is indeed. And let's see, about the last year, I got involved in a system called Jinsen Jitsu, and the story of this guy was there was a really really intense guy in this town, and he was a super bad alcoholic, and he was going down the tubes, and he reached out for inspiration on how to heal himself and how to change his alcohol and a bunch of different things in his life. And he developed a system with being able to relate the fingers to different organs, to different emotions, and I am amazed at this system because it is so amazingly simple. Like there are things called the depths. That's the way they're referred to in here, and there's depth 1 through 6. The fourth depth relates to the muscular system, the attitude of fear. Its element is water. The planets are Mercury with Neptune and Pluto. Colors for it are blue and black. It even has a musical note. And the way that you activate this is so amazingly simple. I just didn't believe it would have any effect at first. And what you do is, like, if you're, I happen to be right-handed, so I use my left hand to represent the finger that I'm working on, and then with my right hand, with my whole palm, I wrap my fingers around that finger and close my fingers around it. And that's the totality of what you have to do. So, I sit there for 10 minutes. You can even do it while you're doing something else, and you start to put those things it's referred to in the book as activating your jumper cables. And what that does is, like, when you're in a fear space, there are things that are out of balance. Your emotions, well, your water, it's a water sign, are out of balance. And that by connecting your energy in this way, it actually puts that back in balance. And now, after a year of using it, I'm astounded. It's become part of my daily go-to. And like, if I'm sitting working working on something, listening to music, even watching the tube. You know, I just sit there and hold one of my fingers. One of the, you know, they relate to, the third depth relates to anger and your blood essence. The second depth relates to your deep skin and grief. The first depth relates to your skin surface, your spleen, and your stomach, and worry. Man, and I am the classic worry wart, and having something that actually affects that is pretty crazy. Plus, it is the simplest thing I know to do, next to doing absolutely nothing. You know, it's just kind of crazy. So, you know, your body is the physical hardware for your energetic body, which is where all of those things originate to begin with. And, you know, there are so many simple ways to activate those parts of you that I've found incredibly useful. I can't tell you how many times I've used my hand as a whole. It's a whole magical cosmos right there in your palm. So what anything you want to bring to this one?
Well, just everything is holographically connected, of course. And again, there's many different systems relating to similar ideas in terms of hand positionings and so on. But if we understand it's all holographically mapped, kindly mute yourself, Bryan. Just
Right.
because there's some background. Thank you. So, and if the holographic principle applies, then of course, as you very well know, you know, from whatever traditional Chinese medicine or whatever, that each part of your body actually has the holographic representation of the whole. And then of course also elemental holographic, archetypical holographic. So everything is contained in everything. And if you know that and then just get a feeling for it, just as you mentioned, you don't even need any big, you know, show or apparatus to get the things done you want to do. If you have the intention and a simple symbolic system, you can even use anywhere, as you just had mentioned. And that even has, in terms of jumper cables, you know, there is Carillion photography, so-called aura photography, and other types of ideas. And they also basically make special kind of images of the cusps of your fingers, which apparently also where the meridians and so on are coming through. So it kind of just makes sense that you use one hand where you have all of the cables, let's say, and then you choose on the other hand just one finger as to kind of feed back all of your energy into one particular subsystem. That's how I'm visualizing it.
That's exactly right. And the reason for, you know, which hand I use, you know, the way, whatever is your primary hand, if that's a left hand or right hand, that's usually the way energy flows out of you. The natural, like for a right-handed person like myself, the natural way that energy comes into you and processes through you is through your left, and I usually see it as like my left hand, and that energy comes up, flows down your body, back up your body, and then flows out and projected out through your right hand, which is why I use that hand to do effects. And you know, so it's about just being aware of how your energy flows, and what, you know, I love the concept of KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. You know, and I love the things that just boil it down to the essence without a lot of trappings or outside things that you need to have, or, you know, some special candle or your consecrated dagger, or whatever it is. You know, it's really cool to realize that you're already complete already, and that it's sitting right there for you to make access of and use.
Exactly. Each and every one being a universe unto themselves. So what do you say we go for one more page, let's say? One more section?
Okay. All right. Atlantis and the gods of antiquity.
Nice.
Well, yeah. I know you're big into that. I haven't expended a ton of energy going back there, but I rode back. I I had this house that was on a really amazing energy vortex, and I found that using this mirror that was on the bathroom wall in this one particular room, I got the craziest images. And back then I was using a Polaroid camera, and I would take that, I would look at myself in the mirror and kind of concentrate, and then take the camera, and I was not flashing it, so it was a slow speed, and I would push it into the mirror if I was trying to see in, or I would start close to the mirror and pull out if I was trying to get something out of it, and then I would watch the photos develop and see what was there, and I actually put together a whole book of those images, and I'll send you a PDF on that. I think you might enjoy it. But there was one particular time where I had this dream that I was in Atlantis, or I wasn't sure whether it was Atlantis or Mu. It was one of the early pre-societies, and there was this. There was this temple that was up off in the distance on top of this mountain, and it was up in like some Tibetan mountain looking kind of scenarios, and there was this deep ravine down below it, this valley with a river running down it, and there was smoke coming up out of the top of the temple, and there was this image of me it was me, but it was not me. My ears were elongated, and it was my eyes, but I had these much larger brow ridges, and I was dressed in ceremonial robes, and I was in jeans and a t-shirt. And there wasn't anything in the reflection. I'm looking in this huge bathroom mirror. It was like, the whole wall above the sinks. So it was a large area. Normally, if you would just shoot that, you'd see the bathtub behind you and the shower out the windows, but man, it was another world. And I had this dream that I was there, and I had been given a 3-note musical sequence that I set up with an arpeggiator and let run, and I was asking to see my first real self here in this world, and I went boom, 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 shot 3 images, and got kind of like different perspectives of the same thing in all 3 of those images. I'll send that to you later this afternoon. I'll have to go dig it up, but I think you would enjoy scoping that out. So that, to me, it was like I got lots of downloads then after that about my existence there, not on a broader sense, but what was going on in that particular situation and that scenario, and some things that I had done there that needed to get addressed and had sort of been following me around for all those incarnations. And that the action I took after that was one of the most mind-blowing, magical experiences I've ever had. Okay. I think, and I put this forth that this is just my story, relate to it however you can. I think that I have been practicing magical scenarios for as long as I've been around here. And I think my ego went out of control, and I made a kind of a thought form that turned into something else that was not good, and it got loose and went off, and I pretty much for the rest of my incarnations have been looking to do something about that. And this is about the year 2003, 2004. I had done a bunch of divination, really intense visions downloaded in my dreams, and all related to what I needed to be doing. I was practicing. I was in the middle of my Ifa studies at that time. I had already been initiated as a Babalao and an Osanista, Osan, the deity of all plants on the whole earth. So I got the download of what to do, and I was working out some scenarios with my name numerologically, and extending those letters, and I got these messages that just completely flipped me out. And I focused in on, okay, I had the opportunity to actually do something about this. And one of the reasons, why did a white guy from the Midwest decide to, get involved deeply in an African religion? And as it came back, that the things that I learned there, and the methods that became available to me there were the things that were going to be useful for actually rectifying this situation. So I fired up a containment scenario and went into what I needed to do. I had gotten really specific information on how I needed to approach it. And I felt that thing coming closer and closer and closer. And finally, when it actually went in to its containment thing, it blew out the transformer on the corner of my block, and 4 blocks of the neighborhood went dark. And I went, wow, and like, I mean, seconds after I put it went in. I went, just relief, and it went boom, this explosion. And like, I saw the sparks. It was pretty close to my house. I saw these sparks exploding, and it just was like crazy. And since then, feeling that something that I couldn't put my finger on gone has just been glorious. I'm so happy that happened. But I think that went all the way back to that time. So anyway, that's sort of my story on that. I know you have a ton to share on this, Raphael.
Well, honestly, I just think it's an incredibly interesting story. All I can say is, and I also read of a friend to whom it happened recently as well, like a few days ago. I also blew out 2 light bulbs within like a day or something. And I already thought like something's faulty. Then I read this report from a friend and I was like, oh, okay, of course this is related. So of course it's always very much fun when you have these very clear correlations. I find it incredibly interesting in terms of basically your story, just as you mentioned. However, it most certainly seems you played it well and quite effectively. And in terms of the general Atlantis backstory, the only, not sure, but one kind of interesting flashback and emotional experience I had at some point in the middle of the night, actually being outside somewhere, was this whole notion of the quote-unquote destruction of Atlantis and being in some way, shape or form responsible for it. In this particular instance, not necessarily by, as you say, maybe having conjured up something that got out of control, even though that is in a sense part for everyone involved in that situation, because that's basically what happened through everyone ultimately. But to be in some kind of a
right, that was kind of the mindset back then.
All right, but what I'm saying is, no matter because the idea being basically that even back then, even just as you may have now, you may have had quote unquote positively unity oriented mystery schools, and then so-called purely left-hand path, self-interest, negatively oriented, domination-oriented mystery schools. And that basically the idea being that whatever energy production methods and so on they had, that this was eventually misused as a weapon, which then synchronistically, ultimately, as far as I'm getting this also via Bashar, they even attracted an asteroid who basically then completely obliterated whatever there may have been. And now we just have remnants like Hawaii and so on. But basically this whole notion of being in some way, shape or form in an administrative position, or at least having great care for the population, but then kind of noticing the general, let's say, ideological downturn or the disintegration of that particular society, and at the same time feeling not being able to remedy it in any way, shape, or form because it's simply, quote unquote, too late to do anything about it. Of course, it's kind of sad situation if you then again actually feel powerless, interestingly enough, even though there the awareness was quite different. But again, there may be, quote unquote, very large forces or themes at work where then it is possible that maybe even no matter how aware you are in an incarnation, unless you really take the special exit or something, that's just what's going down. So you kind of have to deal with that and transform that. However, then also, of course, coming back to the present time and, well, of course, this time, quote unquote, we're going to make it.
Absolutely. Have you ever, do you have connection to that time? Do you see yourself in that time? Have you ever ridden back there yourself and kind of examined who you were back then?
Well, in terms of the information I have, this was the one actual experience where I had, again, this idea, then usually one may say, royalty or whatever, or aristocracy, whatever this may mean. And it's not precisely clear how stratified that society may have been or not. But that was kind of the sense I was getting in terms of caring for, quote unquote, the population, but also sensing that at this point, there is nothing that can truly be done anymore. Or maybe the best thing that can be done is to envision a proper evacuation plan. And of course, also this is really interesting because as it seems, and there are different stories about this and different, for example, the Hungarians, I think it's called Attila Grandpierre has written about this, and there's other stories from other cultures, and many of them actually claim that they are in some way, shape or form going back to some kind of Atlantean tribes or Atlantean influence, which in a sense set up the new types of civilizations, which we now may believe are already quite old, just because this is, of course, talking about a much larger time frame.
Right, the Sumerians. I don't have. Do you have any connection to Mu or some of the other early scenarios?
With Mu, aside that everyone can check out the track, Stand by the Jams from, I think, The K or something, All Bound for Moo Land. It's a fun, trippy song from the early 90s. And that group then also made quite some royalties and actually then got together £1 million, so £1 million, back in 90 something, put it on a pile and put it on fire and documented it, and the videotape got lost and they got it back again or something. But even just by itself, that's a quite interesting action, even with legal consequences, because of course also interesting legally and not really owning the money and so on and so forth. So that's an interesting aside, let's say. I have some references about it, but not so much in terms of personal experience, let's say.
Okay.
Well, what I can share is, as I did some, I believe it's called quantum hypnosis or something, the Loris Cannon method, and there I was guided by a dear friend of mine. Very simple technique, actually. You just get read something, and then you start describing what you see. And there I actually had 3 distinct scenarios, which were kind of thematic, but also clearly within different time frames, I would say, and different places. So the one thing I got was something along the lines of an Incan or Aztec temple. Another frame, I can expand upon it if you're interested, but another frame was, this was about death and immortality. Then another frame was about some kind of quote unquote Native American scenario. This was about family or friendship. And a third one, which was quote unquote, and even this storyline, who knows, how true it is, but something along the lines of being in the Roman Senate and, being distraught at the policy that was agreed upon, which at that point was basically the ban of the Dionysian cult. I mean, we had discussed this in other podcasts also with Jim on Team Rabbit Hole. Even here, there's many different perspectives, what's the positive and negative aspects. But here it was mainly about the recognition that if you, in a very oversimplistic fashion, attempt to completely suppress an aspect of consciousness, that's never good. And that's also going to lead to the downfall of your empire or your structure. So that also kind of relates to the Atlantean story in a sense.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, so these would be some of the references I got in terms of quote unquote previous civilizations, but they may not go as far back as something like Mu.
So you want to do one more? Just one more? Let's do one more.
The Wizard of Oz, Edition 7, Bibliomancy, with Bryan.
Dude, I love those tracks. I'm like jamming. It's like my own little club here. Hey, I pulled a quick angel card just on some thoughts to send out today, and it's one of my favorite cards. It's number 14, the Angel of Truth, Liberty, and Justice, and yeah, I'll read you the reading for it. Begin your freedom. Take off the blindfold and allow yourself to see clearly how you have created the situation you are experiencing. Liberate yourself from this oppressive situation. Spontaneously utilize your creativity, imagination, and your logic reason. Not always the easiest thing, right? Combine these elements of your mind. See things clearly and turn the situation around. Use your powers to transform your situation, like what we were talking about at the very beginning. Recognize where in your life you have power and rebuild your self-confidence. You have a tremendous potential for focusing on innovative ideas and releasing the necessary burst of energy. Don't back yourself into a corner and deliberately try to get yourself into seemingly impossible situations in order to force a really creative situation. Choose to use your intuition and ingenuity to liberate yourself. I love that. Choose to use your intuition and ingenuity to liberate yourself. Be receptive when the pressure is being released and know that you will soon be free to forge ahead. Believe and trust that there will be relaxation from tensions and fears as the pressures ease off and the whole situation just seems to turn around. Woohoo! I'm thinking about the coronavirus, this entire thing, and like the setup we did at the very beginning. Prepare your mind now to enjoy more freedom of thought and activity. That's a kind of particularly intense number for me too, 14. That, you know, in the divine triangle thing that you and I have shared, you know, those life sections, you know, where they go in 27-year things and the lines represent 9 years. For my youth square, the first 27 years of my life, the number for that was 14, and that number is the number of the scribe. And it's also a 5, you know, so it's about balance and equilibrium, and it's very, 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 very good number. You know, curiously enough too, just on the 14 thing, you know, I've done tens of thousands of I've been doing numerology for about 40 years, and I've done tens of thousands of readings, and over the course of that time I've hit on a few people, maybe 10, 20 people who had their you know, your soul number is figured out by adding the total of the vowels in your name. And your soul number is usually your deepest you that only you and God know. And the outer personality number is figured by adding the consonants of your name, and that's the you show the world. Not a mask, but the you that functions in reality. So very few times do those two numbers coincide or the same. So I did my mom and dad's numbers, and my father's two middle numbers were 59, which you add the 5 and the 9 reduces to a 14, which add the 1 and the 4 reduces to a 5. And that is also exactly his outer personality number. So I did my mom's number, and when she had really trippy numbers already, but when I changed, by the way, I've got sort of an interesting mix in me. My dad is German, my mom was Seminole, So I've got this strange mix of vibes in there. So when my mom changed her name to my dad's name, her middle two numbers also changed to 59 over 14 over 5. So those two people together connected like that's the only case in all of the number readings I've done over the years where two people were together and all four of those numbers were exactly the same, which is probably why they stayed married for 35 years, but kind of interesting. And, I just go back to the angel reading, we really have the ability, focus all your energy on health and wellness and dissipating the coming storm, and we'll do it.
Yes.
So I also during the break I flipped another page, and you're going to flip out when you hear this: the life and philosophy of Pythagoras. Oh man, the father of modern mathematics and so many different things. He has been an extreme influence in this life and many others as well. And for those of you who don't know, he was a Greek philosopher who kind of originated the Greek mathematical system. And not just with numbers, but also defining the Platonic shapes and what those structures, what those concrete physical structures represent on the energetic and astral side of life. And he broke it down into so many of the building blocks and the representation of being, I'm such a visual person that I learn things so much faster and with a depth of understanding when I see a picture of something, even if it's just in my mind, but when I can visualize a concrete picture, that learning happens so much faster than if I'm hearing somebody talk to me and tell me stuff. So those things, as well as the triangle with the tetragrammaton in it, one of the bulwarks of my magical cosmology. So the number system, the system of doing numerology that I use came from that, from him in that time. And man, what they say numbers don't lie. They're really not about opinions. They're specific frequencies that buzz at this specific frequency. Just like ohm is 138 hertz. It doesn't change. Some people might debate that and say no, it's 136.2 if you're using 432 designation. But either way, whichever designation you use, that is always that. And there's a purity about numbers that just really, really appeal to me, and they are so alive in so many directions. And just like the major arcana and the tarot or other innumerable examples, numbers, pure numbers are archetypes of a kind and have an energy that's alive. I was having a conversation with somebody this weekend about astrology and what is it about, how can planets out there and how can Saturn that many millions of miles away really be affecting us? But my belief on this, I've come to this to be a truth for me because I've tried it in so many different directions. Those energies aren't really outside you. The physical planet of Saturn is just really a metaphorical symbol for the energy of Saturn that's inside your actual inner universe. And that's where the energy of that actually originates and manifests from, and why those things can seem so personal and have such a personal effect on you. And numbers are exactly the same way, you know, like the number 3, it's the burning fire of the creative light. You know, it's like, my goodness, to be able to connect to that archetype and find inspiration and the structure of 3. And I mean, how many, you know, think about every cosmological system has a trinity of sorts, you know, Father, Son, Holy Ghost, you know, the Osiris and Horus, and, you know, I mean, it just goes on and on and on and on and on. Every system has their trinity of sorts, that those 3 entities that work together that form a whole that's bigger than the parts. And you know, so I just like to invite anyone that hasn't gotten involved in a numerological exploration, man, you know, scope it out. I think you'll find it really interesting. It'll tell you so many things about yourself. It's explained the course of my life in detail that's a little too close for comfort. So anyway, anything to add to that, Raphael?
Well, all I can say is I'm equally fascinated by all these numerological correspondences and systems. I was just also, because as you mentioned, this one reference system is by Faith Chavain and Dusty Bunker, called the Divine Triangle. And even here, as I understand, supposedly, quote unquote, this was channeled via Pythagoras, right?
Exactly.
Right. So here, maybe just, you know, to give some background, just to read one paragraph out of this section on Pythagoras in The Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly Palmer Hall. It says, the god of Pythagoras was the monad, or the one that is everything. He described God as a supreme mind distributed throughout all parts of the universe, the cause of all things, the intelligence of all things, and the power within all things. He further declared the motion of God to be circular, the body of God to be composed of the substance of light, and the nature of God to be composed of the substance of truth. What do you say, Bryan?
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, here, let me share one with you too. This is my favorite little chunk out of that. The study of geometry, music, and astronomy was considered essential to a rational understanding of God, man, or nature, and no one could accompany Pythagoras as a disciple who was not thoroughly familiar with these sciences. Many came seeking admission to his school, and each applicant was tested on these 3 subjects. If found ignorant, he was summarily dismissed. Oh, too funny. Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's
so much for entrance exams, yeah.
Yeah,
but even here, the beauty of it is, and this is coming up actually in the conclusion of Manly Palmer Hall's Secret Teachings of All Ages, it very well lines out that even today, information can be widely shared. Kindly mute yourself, Bryan. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So basically, yeah, that even in the conclusion, it then reminds us that information can be widely shared, actually, because still then it is only understood by those who are self-initiated. So even now, one may talk of many mysteries and many also highly effective and potential beneficial techniques, and they may be understood by anyone even without an advanced degree in metaphysics, mathematics, or anything like that. However, still one will only even come to resonate with these ideas and attempting and then being able to understand them if one already is, in a sense, self-initiated. So then, as it says, when the student is ready, the master appears in whatever form that may be. Can even be a scripture.
That can be yourself.
Ultimately, only just as a reflection.
Yes, absolutely. The thing about that I was just referring to with the archetypes being inside your personal cosmology, so in a way, when you decide that that's a path you want to explore and you're sending out your vibration to your subconscious and your higher self and your entirety of your being, that you want to progress and elevate and evolve your spirit and your understanding of where we are and what we're doing here, that you already have those tools. Those numbers are really already there for you to use. And on the simplest way of doing it, like the numerology thing, just doing your numbers, that's for anyone who would make the effort and take the time to actually sit down and want to look at it through that mode. It's been amazingly eye-opening to take a look at your personal structure through the filter of different philosophical approaches, like looking at yourself through numerology and looking at your astrological side. You would think that those things would be somewhat different and add like kind of different perspectives, but I in my own exploration I found just the opposite. Like the things that were like when I was studying Ifa, those things coincided with all of the things that I already knew about myself, astrologically, numerologically, which those are Western concepts and constructs, or where those originated from. And the Ifa scenario was a purely African construct, and where that originated. And you expect those things to be divergent, but they were also immensely synchronous, and finding yourself described through those scenarios, like Ifa deities, those are archetypes and constructs that come out of a particular place in the world that serve that time and that spot of the people that arose in, and like Pythagoras and the whole Greek philosophy school of thought, and where that is all like migrated to across the I Ching and the Loshu magic square in China. It's kind of crazy the way they all sort of come together, and in each one of those, this is curious. In each one of those, I've asked every time, what should be my life path, and the path that I'm on is the one that comes back in every single discipline, which has been kind of a crazy confirmation, but also kind of a solid base for me to go and explore some of the crazier concepts that are getting experienced with. It's kind of really cool to see physics, which is, considered to be a pure science and relies heavily on mathematics and equations, coming things that were considered magic in the ancient past are now getting described by physics, and they're actually finding physical reference to those things, dark matter, dark energy, different dimensions, quasars. One of the coolest things I've been exploring in the last couple weeks is the notion that they believe now that inside of a black hole is a white hole that's spewing out in the opposite direction and creating things, as rather than taking in and kind of shredding it and putting it back together. Just amazing way to see that what's been considered magic and science are way on a collision course. Like, they're developing technologies now that can, start to register and measure things, astral energies, and things that were considered a purely spiritual concept, which I'm enjoying. I'm glad I'm alive during the time that I get to see that.
Yeah, well,
Hey,
I'm
go
happy
ahead.
it's happening finally.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
all of these ideas, which anyhow have been shared from, who knows, from nursery rhymes to all the magic traditions surviving somewhat and then being declared bankrupt by the new quote unquote establishment, now in a sense getting redeemed and ideally getting their proper place and position so that society and individuals again can function as a whole.
That is so true. You know, I'm having the worst mute day, man. Forgive me, okay?
If I All right, so well, any so-called closing words or something along these lines you would like to
Yeah,
share?
yeah. I had mentioned earlier that Jinsen Jitsu system. I don't normally recommend books, but I would really like to pass this one along. It's been so useful to me. I consider it a real gift. You know, I briefly touched on those six really simple things, but you know, it throughout the book, the whole scenario details different energy connections and meridians, and I've been able to keep myself really healthy and my body in a state that's probably much younger than my age should be, and I really give a lot of credit to this system and like to pass it on. The name of the book is The Touch of Healing, and it's by a woman named Alice Burmeister. That's Burmeister. And just would love to see some other people. I'd love for you to get it, Raphael, and test it out yourself. See if you get similar results.
Yeah, thanks. I will. Anyhow, I always like simple techniques, and I have been, I would say, somewhat consciously using some of those in some ways already, because I'm familiar with like the Taoist meridian system and certain techniques there. But I'm happy to check out how it correlates, and you know, there's always different perspectives on any technique. And
Yeah,
I would just like,
I'm looking
yeah,
at this and like its connection to it's very similar in utilizing the energy meridians in acupuncture, which kind of really just tickles me. That's a system I've been really interested in for a long time too, and finding there's some correspondences in there are really kind of cool.
And what I would like to ultimately say as well is that, as we just referenced Pythagoras as described by Manly Palmer Hall, and he says that the nature of God is composed of the substance of truth, then even if we can speculate about how any of these systems originated, my honest guess would rather be that they have been more unified in a sense at some point and then got splintered up. But even if they would have somehow developed independently, it doesn't matter, because if they point towards the same thing, or if they actually deal with quote unquote God, quote unquote all that is oneself, and therefore all relate to that substance of truth, then it just makes sense that, just as you mentioned, all these different systems ultimately come out with very similar results and ideas.
Well, I have an opinion about that, and I don't put this forth as I think this is the case, but this is kind of like what it looks like to me right at the moment. It seems like, you know, we got blasted with a global wave, and you know, if you think back 1,000 years, 2,000 years, you know, the world was a much more spread out place, you know, and there weren't connections, you know, all over the world. It was very difficult to communicate those things. So I think that the people that were spiritual antennas in different parts of the world received that information and then disseminated that, you know, through their cultural concepts and their philosophical ideas and the nature of the physical place that they actually lived in. You know, like the Ifa stuff is so about like the gods relate to nature and animals and the place that they were living in and the jungle
Yes,
and
and
in
seen,
Africa. Yeah, go ahead.
just seen in a positive sense, then if we would believe the idea of some kind of Atlantean type civilization highly developed, then them evacuating and going to different regions, and there is some other, as I understand, evidence and theories on this, and then that group basically seeding different, let's say, quote unquote, Europe mainland civilizations that potentially unto themselves and their own culture and own population that was already existent there may not have been as developed. Could be. So that would just kind of reiterate the
Yeah.
whole alien contact scenario, even though they don't even need to be aliens, but may be seen as demigods as well. If they descend with all that knowledge, maybe slightly different genetics and much higher spiritual awareness. And then it would make special sense, let's say, not to use a generalized system, but actually modulate it so that local people who may still be just starting to access these understandings can just relate to it, because it's then, the same symbols you see in your nature and all of that is all incorporated. Because then I would sense it is much more relevant to do so than if the population you quote unquote want to teach or you are sharing culture with already is aware on such a high level. Then you can get away with just a few geometric shapes and can do the same for everyone. You see what I'm saying?
That's very true. One of the best examples that we've seen in just the last couple hundred years of that process of seeding, the original Lahr system happened in Nigeria, and then as that spread, to the New World, people brought those systems with them and landed in South America and here in the U.S. and, the Caribbean islands, so all of the Afro-Cuban, the multiplicity of Afro-Cuban cosmologies, from voodoo to candomblé to palomayombe, to they all had their, those all came from Nigeria as its root. And now, after many, many generations of those people practicing those things in those specific areas, have evolved into their own specific cosmology that relates to that, And one of the things that I find at this point in my life that I find myself really attracted to is simplicity and lack of dogma. And that's one of the reasons I really love the numbers, because they're dogma free. They are what they are. Take them or leave them. And there's not a lot of mythological layering on top of that to try to explain them or make them into an anthropomorphized deity that then you can relate to and talk to, so I've really been and the platonic shapes, etc. So that's kind of where I've really been and enjoying being lately. Simple is always best. And I guess just to end up, I just would like to express my gratitude to the universe, first of all, and the getting to enjoy the myriad of miracles you see around you at all time. And I would just like to encourage everyone to, maybe take today and focus on the incredible number of things that there are to be grateful for, instead of the things you don't like and want to bitch about. And even if you just took one day and just stayed off the bitch zone and stayed in the grateful zone, it's a happy place. And I'd love to see that spreading around as much as it can. And grateful to you too for this scenario. I enjoy it very much, and hope it spurs somebody to investigate things in the world that has given me so much joy on their own. So thanks, Raphael. Awesome. And thank
you
for the
so
music,
much,
man. You're a great DJ, brother.
And this is just a select part of it, but thank you so much. And yeah, thank you for your words. Thank you for your explorations. Thank you for sharing. And with this, we're going to say goodbye for now and meet y'all at the next now. with Bryan, Wizard of Oz. Thank you
Awesome,
so much,
Raphael.
Bryan, once again.
Thank you, man. And you're welcome. We'll talk to you soon.
Radio OKiTALK.